The world of major global events is often a masterful illusion constructed with bright lights, carefully choreographed moments, and a sweeping sense of purpose that blinds the public to the quiet shifting of structural foundations behind the scenes. We look at massive international gatherings, star-studded galas, and global charitable initiatives as permanent fixtures of our modern cultural landscape, assuming that because an idea is noble, its survival is naturally guaranteed. For a long time, the public has tuned in to witness grand spectacles of human resilience, celebrating triumph over adversity under the banner of high-profile patrons who command the attention of the global press. It is easy to become mesmerized by the flashing cameras, the emotional introductory packages, and the inspiring speeches delivered from heavily guarded podiums, believing that what we see on our screens is an unshakable empire of goodwill. Yet, behind the curtain of every massive humanitarian or athletic endeavor lies a complex, fragile web of logistics, massive financial obligations, and shifting public sentiment that can turn even the most celebrated initiative into a profound liability. In the modern era, the shelf life of public tolerance is shorter than it has ever been, and even the most seemingly bulletproof charitable endeavors are finding that a prestigious reputation alone can no longer pay the mounting bills. As the cost of staging these grand international showcases continues to skyrocket into tens of millions of pounds, the reliance on public funding and corporate generosity has reached a critical breaking point, exposing deep vulnerabilities in structures once thought to be immortal. If you want to stay informed on how these massive global events are shifting, and if you want to discover the hidden truths behind the world's most high-profile public figures before anyone else, make sure to hit the subscribe button right now and join our growing community for daily deep dives into the stories shaping our world. The cracks in these grand edifices often begin where the public rarely looks, deep within the balance sheets, the quiet departures of long-term executive staff, and the growing murmurs of discontent from local communities asked to foot the astronomical bill for a fleeting moment in the global spotlight. We are living in a time of unprecedented financial scrutiny, where ordinary citizens and municipal governments are increasingly unwilling to accept the massive financial burdens associated with elite global showcases, forcing us to ask how long a noble cause can survive when its primary engine is no longer inspiration, but an expensive exercise in brand preservation. The romanticism that once surrounded international humanitarian projects is rapidly giving way to a cold, hard mathematical reality, as independent investigative journalism begins to pull back the layers of carefully managed public relations to reveal a much more complicated and troubling picture. When a major global initiative begins to stumble, the initial signs are rarely explosive. Instead, they manifest as subtle shifts in corporate sponsorships, a sudden reliance on non-cash in-kind donations, and an escalating sense of desperation among the organizers who are forced to white-knuckle their way through upcoming commitments. This atmospheric tension sets the stage for a dramatic re-evaluation of what it truly means to champion a global cause in the modern media ecosystem, where every movement is tracked, every dollar is counted, and the line between genuine altruism and high-stakes commercial marketing becomes increasingly blurred. As we prepare to look closer at the changing tides of international patronage and the immense structural challenges facing one of the most talked about modern spectacles, we must first understand the delicate environment in which these events operate, where a single misstep can transform a symbol of global hope into a lightning rod for intense public scrutiny and financial instability. The illusion of seamless global success begins to disintegrate when the cold reality of financial accounting collides with the grand ambitions of high-profile international showcases. For years, the Invictus Games have been presented to the world as a triumphant, self-sustaining beacon of hope for wounded veterans, powered by the undeniable star power of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. However, behind the carefully curated media packages and the emotional footage of athletic resilience, a severe budgetary crisis totaling £45 million has emerged, threatening the very survival of the entire enterprise. The structural cracks became impossible to ignore in the wake of recent events in Dusseldorf and Vancouver, where mounting costs and logistical headaches began to raise serious red flags among independent observers and seasoned royal commentators alike. Now, as the organization marches toward the upcoming event in Birmingham, the financial architecture supporting the Games is facing a profound existential test that has left senior insiders deeply panicked. The British government and local municipal authorities have stepped forward with a massive injection of £29 million of public taxpayer money to rescue the event, a staggering sum intended to act as the foundational bedrock for the upcoming competition. According to the foundational model of the Invictus Games, these massive public grants are supposed to be matched or exceeded by robust corporate partnerships and individual philanthropy, creating a balanced, privately subsidized ecosystem. Yet, investigative reports indicate a devastating shortfall, with the Games currently securing a mere £4 million in actual corporate cash donations, a tiny fraction of what is required to keep an operation of this magnitude afloat. To make matters worse, this limited pool of liquid capital reportedly comes from relatively unknown corporations, while the historically dependable, massive multinational sponsors are quietly altering their approach to philanthropy. Global giants like Deloitte, which once served as the financial backbone of the organization's public relations triumphs, are no longer injecting vast sums of cold, hard cash into the central treasury, choosing instead to provide in-kind services and logistical support. While these non-cash contributions are undoubtedly useful for the day-to-day operations of an athletic competition, they do absolutely nothing to alleviate the crippling cash flow crisis or pay the escalating bills that threaten to paralyze the entire administration. This unprecedented funding drought has sparked a severe internal staffing crisis, with key personnel and operational experts quietly fleeing the organization as the immense pressure of staging a global tournament without adequate liquidity takes its toll. On the ground, the prevailing sentiment among the remaining management team is a grim determination to simply white-knuckle their way through the Birmingham event, praying that they can survive the immediate crisis before the entire structure collapses under the weight of its own administrative bloat. This mounting financial desperation has forced a harsh re-examination of the entire concept behind the Invictus Games, peeling back the layers of public relations mythology to reveal a surprising historical truth. For years, global audiences have credited Prince Harry as the sole creative mastermind behind this international phenomenon, celebrating his involvement as a stroke of unparalleled humanitarian genius. In reality, the concept was entirely adapted from an existing American template, specifically the Department of Defense's Warrior Games, an event Prince Harry witnessed firsthand during a visit to San Diego alongside high-profile figures like the Biden family. Impressed by the efficiency and profound emotional impact of the American tournament, a highly sophisticated palace public relations apparatus successfully copied and pasted the entire framework, transforming it into a global vehicle for the young prince's personal brand. However, unlike the Invictus Games, which demand tens of millions of pounds to cater to a relatively small group of participants, the original Warrior Games in the United States and similar veterans programs in Australia operate for pennies on the dollar, delivering direct, tangible benefits without the astronomical overhead. This massive disparity in efficiency has triggered a wave of public outrage, particularly as wounded warriors themselves begin to discover the deeply troubling ways the Invictus budget is actually allocated. According to the organization's own website and financial disclosures, the Invictus Games do not actually cover the travel, lodging, or participation costs for the competitors unless they are currently serving in active military duty. This policy creates a devastating paradox for the very community the Games claim to honor, given that an individual who has suffered catastrophic, life-altering injuries like losing a limb is almost never retained on active duty service. Consequently, the vast majority of these vulnerable, inspiring veterans are forced to secure their own funding or rely on outside charity just to show up and compete, a harsh reality that stands in stark, painful contrast to the luxurious accommodations and high-level security provided to the event's royal patrons. The realization that an incredibly tiny fraction of the multi-million-pound budget, reportedly only around £200,000, actually goes directly towards supporting the warriors themselves, has shattered the organization's pristine reputation. The rest of this massive pool of wealth is swallowed whole by bloated administrative salaries, skyrocketing legal fees, lavish opening and closing concerts, and the astronomical costs associated with managing a global media circus. This profound disconnect between the high-minded rhetoric of veteran empowerment and the reality of corporate expenditure became painfully evident during Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's controversial tour of Australia, an event that many critics and local citizens openly derided as a quasi-royal promotional campaign and a transparent exercise in personal brand building. The backlash was so severe that the Australian government and its veterans organizations ultimately made the decision to distance themselves from the Invictus framework entirely, declaring that they would no longer fund these incredibly expensive overseas initiatives when they already possessed highly effective, localized programs that genuinely put the needs of wounded soldiers ahead of international celebrity culture. The growing perception that the Games have been transformed from a sacred tribute into an elaborate, self-serving marketing platform has created deep-seated resentment among the very people who sacrificed everything for their countries, setting the stage for an inevitable reckoning that could bring the entire multi-million-pound empire crashing down. The internal friction within the Invictus Games organization has reached a boiling point as the public and the veterans themselves begin to look past the glamorous facades to examine the severe logistical and financial consequences of high-profile celebrity patronage. One of the most explosive and deeply resented issues surrounding the upcoming Birmingham Games is the staggering cost of security required to protect Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, a massive financial burden that will ultimately be extracted from the pockets of British taxpayers. The security situation in Birmingham is uniquely volatile and exceptionally high risk due to the city's complex demographic layout, which includes a very large, deeply established Muslim population that numbers well over 30% of the local citizenry. Public anger within this community and across the wider nation has remained intensely elevated following Prince Harry's highly controversial decision to publish explicit, highly provocative details in his memoir, Spare, where he openly bragged about the specific number of Taliban fighters he killed during his military deployment. This public disclosure was widely condemned by security experts as a catastrophic tactical error that painted a massive target on his back and dramatically escalated the threat level for any public event he attends within the United Kingdom. Because of the stringent legal protocols governing international public figures and high-risk individuals, when the prince provides the British government with his mandatory 29 days of notice before arriving on UK soil, state intelligence and law enforcement agencies are legally obligated to conduct a thorough risk assessment. Given the severe, self-inflicted nature of the threat, the state is forced to deploy an incredibly sophisticated, ultra-luxurious counterterrorism security apparatus to guarantee his safety, costing millions of pounds that ordinary citizens are forced to subsidize through their national taxes. This stands in stark, painful contrast to the experience of ordinary citizens in Canada and Australia, who previously voiced intense public outrage when their own municipal budgets were drained to fund what many openly labeled as a glorified, taxpayer-funded ego trip for two elite individuals who frequently use these charitable platforms to film commercial documentaries and secure lucrative global media contracts. The profound disconnect between the lived reality of the wounded veterans and the hyper-curated Hollywood-style production of the Games has sparked a widespread rebellion among the very competitors the event was designed to celebrate. Renowned royal biographers and investigative journalists like Tom Bauer have meticulously documented a growing wave of deep-seated exhaustion and resentment among elite military veterans who are flatly refusing to participate in future iterations of the Games. These highly decorated soldiers, many of whom survived horrific battlefield trauma and suffered life-altering physical injuries, have expressed immense disgust with the fact that the entire competition has been systematically hijacked, transforming a sacred athletic tribute into an ostentatious, highly commercialized reality television production widely derided as the Harry and Meghan show. Veterans are increasingly vocal about their desire to compete in entirely independent, unaligned athletic tournaments where the pure spirit of sportsmanship and mutual rehabilitation can be celebrated without the suffocating, distracting presence of personal publicity crews, private photographers, and orchestrated media stunts. The stark reality of this media manipulation was fully exposed during the events in Vancouver, where the staggering, astronomical sum of over 60 million Canadian dollars was spent to accommodate a tiny, surprisingly small group of just over 500 competitors. Despite the massive, multi-million-dollar publicity campaign engineered to project an image of overwhelming global adoration, independent journalists on the ground revealed that the actual stadium seats were frequently empty, devoid of any genuine public audience or organic local enthusiasm. To combat the embarrassing visual of empty bleachers, the couple's highly sophisticated public relations team utilized well-known tricks of the trade, aggressively gathering small, concentrated groups of passing spectators to crowd tightly around the royal pair for a brief, highly choreographed photo opportunity. The moment the private, high-resolution cameras captured the illusion of a packed, adoring house, the couple would promptly exit the venue with their entourage, leaving the remaining crowd to immediately disperse and exposing the entire event as a carefully manufactured mirage designed exclusively to burnish their global reputation and market their latest commercial ventures. This stark realization raises profound, deeply troubling questions about the long-term survival of the Invictus Games after the Birmingham tournament concludes. As governments, corporate sponsors, and the international public face a monumental turning point where the high